Ithinar's Bloom by H. Jane Harrington. Chapter 24. Any Shelter from the Rain. Sometimes it's safer to brave the storm than chance the cave. Master Kezias. Despite the incident in Behalia, Kier was surprisingly affable for the next 3 weeks. She bantered lightly with Scilio and even smiled at Vaughn occasionally. The support they had shown Kier following her spat, or eruption was a truer description, made all the difference. Vaughn was not sure what Ambria had meant by the comments about a slave, or the reference to the scourge of Balinor, but he decided against inquiry. It was obviously something that bothered Kier deeply, and Vaughn did not want to cause her discomfort. Perhaps she would confide in him when she was ready. They had enjoyed a peaceful morning to the step of Scilio's lively sea shanties. The Bardian's repertoire was certainly as bottomless as the Gillincrass Sea. When they edged a dry patch of farm, Scilio concluded his song in favor of conversation. "I must inquire, Kier," he commented. "Notwithstanding the desire to dress to occupation, why outfit yourself in such rugged apparel? I believe there lies an exceedingly beautiful woman underneath the brim of your, shall we say, well-seasoned hat." He's a braver man than I, Vaughn thought, to ask her such a thing. "Are men attracted to me in this outfit, Ponytail?" "Please take no umbrage if I answer in the negative." Scilio winced. "Would a man lust after a scruffy sword-toter in a dirty old hat and ugly shirt?" "I would have to say no." "Exactly." Scilio's brow furrowed, and he nodded thoughtfully. "However, you are more than capable of fending off any manner of scoundrel that might attempt to make your acquaintance, forcefully or otherwise. Dressing like this keeps men away outright. I have no desire to attract attention. The more eyes I catch, the more trouble I draw. Simple as that." "Pellucid logic," Scilio exhaled. "But the scenery is so drab and agrestic in this part of Mercaria, I long for a portrait of beauty upon which to gaze." "All the more reason for me not to dress like one," Kier snorted. Vaughn chuckled at the exchange. Like Scilio, he believed Kier would look gorgeous in attire suiting her gender. He tried to imagine her in the gown of a noblewoman, adorned with jewels and rouge. She was one of the most beautiful women Vaughn had ever seen, though she tried, and succeeded, to hide her striking features under that old hat. Vaughn was certain Kier had once been sought after by young noblemen, as was evident by her royal betrothal. If only she would divulge her past. It was, however, another topic for another day. Perhaps in time he might be more comfortable asking about his brother. It was obvious how much Kier hated her former fiancé, and Vaughn did not want to evoke painful memories. She was finally beginning to melt her glacier and share her captivating smile. He dared not risk marring these precious moments. "You know, Ponytail, I've been thinking about that battle at the skiff a few weeks ago," Kier said conversationally. "That was quite a move you pulled, that hip throw. But you don't seem to have any formal weapons training. Where'd you learn such a technique?" "Oh, no master warrior would ever waste his time with a jester like me," Scilio chuckled. "I picked up a few moves on the stage. As Vaughn can attest, thespians must learn a multitude of different skills, and some plays do have fight sequences." Scilio leaned conspiratorially towards Vaughn and mused, "Though I much prefer the love scenes." Vaughn snickered and slapped Scilio on the back. Kier rolled her eyes. The bard, apparently on an amused roll, added, "Indeed I, Thomas Scilio, was quite famed for my love scenes on the stage. Women swooned in the audience every night, taken in by my uncountable charms. I was quite renowned amongst the noble-born. As a woman of breeding, Kier, surely you've heard of me." "Nope. I like the fight scenes myself," Kier tossed back casually. "By the way, I always thought the pronunciation of your surname was Scilio." "It is typically," Scilio confirmed, "but I prefer my pronunciation. Emphasis on the skill." Kier smirked. "You sure are a breed of your own, you know that?" "Of course." Scilio smiled unapologetically smug. "Mother always said I was the special one." A clap of thunder barked in the distance, and Kier's eyes darted skyward. All the merriment left her face instantly. "A storm approaches." Scilio pointed at the clouds. "This one came from nowhere." "We should find shelter. I don't fancy a soaking," Vaughn said. "There's a farm just over the hill. Perhaps they will provide accommodations until the rains pass," Scilio suggested. Vaughn noticed Kier's sullen expression. Her mood seemed to have darkened considerably in the last few seconds, and he placed a tentative hand on her arm. "Kier, Is something wrong?" She shoved his hand aside. "No, let's go." Vaughn sighed and followed after her. She was erecting that barrier again. He couldn't imagine what could have disheartened her so quickly, save perhaps the thought of getting wet. Somehow he knew the change in temperament was more than that. They quickened their step, and Vaughn was thankful when they reached the farmhouse. It had a weathered look about it, just short of dilapidation. Peeling paint crackled on the siding, and several rotting beams hung over the porch. The field looked dry, untended, and a small patch of dirt near the house sported several sickly tomato vines amongst the weeds. Farming implements rusted alongside an old barn. It was obvious by the size of the house that the farm had once been quite prosperous. The grounds were quiet as a tomb, and Vaughn began to wonder if anyone was home, or if anyone even lived there at all. "Hello, the house!" Scilio called. The flapping of an outbuilding door was the only reply. "Well, since the residents of this woebegone establishment seem to have moved on to greener pastures..." Scilio strode toward the porch. An arrow bit the ground at his feet, and he jumped back, grabbing for one of his own. Kier and Vaughn reached for their swords, leaving them sheathed but disengaged. "Who goes there? Speak fast, or the next arrow goes through the purty one's brain." Vaughn stepped forward and held his hand aloft. "Please, we mean no harm. We are humble travelers. Might we take shelter from the coming storm in your barn?" There was a period of silence, and Vaughn's heart drummed against his ribcage. He wasn't sure whether or not the archer would really shoot Kier, but he was not about to call the bluff. After a tense moment of silence, the voice finally called, "You got Laurens?" "We can offer a little, perhaps," Vaughn said, throwing an insecure glance at Kier. "We don't have much." Another period of silence followed, and Vaughn anticipated rejection. Suddenly, the front door swung open. "Come inside," the voice called. Kier and Scilio entered, with Vaughn pressed close behind. They found themselves in a receiving room attached to a long foyer. The winding staircase was positioned at the far end, and on either side several doors closed off other chambers. Creaking floorboards from the top of the stairs alerted them to a dirty, ragged young man, probably no older than 15. The boy eased down the first few stairs, cautiously aiming a flimsy bow. "You ain't going to use them weapons?" he asked. "'Cause I'm a good shot. Can take down a moving rabbit at 50 paces. "I assure you we mean no harm," Scilio soothed. The young man lowered his bow. "Good, 'cause I sure didn't want to hurt that pretty head of yours." He pointed a finger at Scilio and displayed a toothless smile. "It's all right, Mama," the boy called up the stairs. "Don't reckon they mean to rob us." Vaughn frowned. That there was anything of value on the entire property was doubtful. A thief would have to be desperate to rob such a destitute family. A skinny, disheveled woman began limping down the stairs. Her ragged dress, too large for her small frame, hung on her shoulders. "I'm sorry for the rude welcome." The woman's voice was deep and coarse. "We get kind of skittish around strangers these days." Vaughn made introductions, limiting himself to first names only. "I'm Murtis. That's my boy Jairus." She indicated the young man. "Girl Jesh is upstairs." "Are you injured?" Vaughn asked, noting her pronounced limp. The woman shook her head. "Just a bum leg from a gale shark attack." "A gale shark? Is that what we encountered on the road?" Vaughn turned to Kier. She said nothing, but stared distantly through the doorway at the impending storm. "They're right horrible creatures," Murtis continued, seeming to lose herself in the maundering. "Killed my husband and my oldest sons last year. Left me with this farm and mouths to feed. Not much you can do with the gale shark when they catch you unawares. Them coyotes breeding more every year, moving out from Arcadia, expanding their territories, killing us with their claws and fangs." "I'm sorry for your tragedy," Vaughn said. "It must be difficult to maintain a farm alone, especially with an infirmity." The woman nodded and opened the doors to a sitting room. It was dusty and dark. A seating area, the furniture covered with old sheets, was arranged in the center of the room, and a large window took up most of the front wall. Heavy curtains blocked out the light. From the musty smell, Vaughn could tell that the room was rarely used. "We don't get much company come round here, but please enjoy what little we have. You can sleep in this room. I'm sorry we don't got much to offer," Murtis told them. Vaughn inclined his head politely. "That's quite all right, kind lady. All we need is shelter. The barn would have sufficed." "Oh, you don't want to stay in the barn," Jairus snickered. "Them ghosts gets to howling at night. A soldier went mad spending the night out there. Hung himself from the rafters, he did. Vaughn detected a trace of mean spirit in his tone. That's enough, Jarris. Go tend your chores, Murtis said sharply. Jarris scooted out the front door. Vaughn looked to Scilio, whose face betrayed his discomfort. The exuberance that the bard usually projected was muted and withheld, and his features were drawn. Vaughn's own sense of unease was growing as well. There was something odd about this family. Still, he would much rather brave their peculiarities than weather the storm unsheltered. Murtis hobbled to the window and pulled the heavy curtain away, allowing dim light to flood the room. The view from the large window must have been quite beautiful when the land was tended and thick with produce. Now the dry brown field and foreboding dark overhead clouds painted a dismal scene. Murtis moved to a lamp, striking a piece of flint repeatedly in an effort to generate more light. When she was unsuccessful, Scilio used a weak inferno wisp to ignite the wick. He repeated the process at several other lamps positioned on the walls until the room was well lit. "Make yourselves to home. I'll fix something for supper," Murtis said. She exited the room, closing the doors behind her. Kier moved to the window, silently watching the storm approach. Thunder rumbled, and rain suddenly began spilling in frog-choking torrents. Within seconds, the ground beyond the porch turned soupy with mud. "I don't like this, Vaughn," Scilio said. "I am ill at ease with their oddities." Vaughn understood the sentiment, but he also felt a pang of sympathy for the family. "They've seen hardship in the last year, Toma. Trauma can do strange things to people," Vaughn said sadly. He glanced at Kier, who remained motionless. "They mentioned Laurens," Scilio commented quietly. "How much do you think they'll demand? We really can't spare much." Vaughn shrugged. "I don't know, but just look at the state of this place. Look at them. Honestly, man, how can I not give them something?" Scilio sighed and nodded, then proceeded to remove the dusty sheets from the couches. The furnishings underneath were in good repair, so Vaughn and Scilio sank into them, propping their feet up unceremoniously. "Kier, do you want to sit down?" Vaughn asked, aware that she was still standing at the window. "No, I'm fine here," she replied softly, never removing her eyes from the storm. Scilio hooked a thumb at Kier questioningly, but Vaughn knew nothing more than the bard. He shrugged uncertainly and mouthed, "I don't know." The hush amidst the roaring rain was haunting, and the ticking of a clock on the fireplace mantel only served to increase the distress of the room. The antsy stillness was not easing Vaughn's nerves, so he rose to study the paintings on the wall, then moved to view a collection of framed family magic captures on a table. They portrayed happy, well-groomed people. Vaughn recognized the farmhouse, featured prominently in the background of one picture. It looked very different in the image, well-maintained and clean. He picked up the frame, wondering how Murtis had looked when she was younger and in better health. He studied the family in the capture, a man, woman, and 3 small girls. The woman and children did not resemble Murtis and her son at all, so he moved on to another capture. He was surprised to find that Murtis was not portrayed in any of the pictures. "I wonder who these people are," Vaughn commented. "They're my cousins." Murtis's raspy voice startled Vaughn, and he almost dropped the frame. She was standing in the doorway, leaning on a cane, piercing Vaughn with her eyes. "They lived in this house, before my husband bought it." Vaughn nodded and returned the capture to its place. "It's a lovely family." The woman ignored the comment. "Supper's ready." Vaughn followed Murtis toward the dining room, located across the foyer. Scilio trailed him, pausing for a moment to address Kier. "Are you not coming?" Vaughn couldn't see Kier as she was still in the sitting room, but he heard her detached response. "Not hungry." Vaughn decided not to provoke her, so he entered the dining room and found a seat at the table. Scilio sat beside him as Murtis placed a bowl of watery cabbage between them. She handed each an old chipped plate. Vaughn was careful not to cut himself on a jagged edge. Jarris entered the room and sat across from them, his hungry eyes fixed on Scilio. Vaughn spoon-sunned the cabbage onto his plate and exchanged glances with the bard. If this was all Murtis could provide for her children, his heart ached for her all the more. "May I be excused for a moment?" Vaughn asked the matron suddenly. "I forgot something." Murtis nodded curtly and served herself. Vaughn hurried into the sitting room and found their bags. He took inventory and found 4 days' worth of rice, beans, jerky, apples, tea, and hard biscuits. Kier glanced over her shoulder. "What are you doing?" "I can't stand this, Kier. These people are starving. I'm just going to help them out a bit. We can always restock at the next town." Kier returned her gaze to the window with no comment. Vaughn entered the foyer and started for the dining room, but his feet slowed inexplicably. Turning, his gaze fell on an unremarkable door near the staircase. As he approached, the foyer seemed to chill considerably. Vaughn squirmed at the cold that swept him from neck to toes. Some ethereal sound was calling him, and he was unable to break free from the haunting tune.